What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Get Paid for Your Pet. Today we are talking about safety. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in your Airbnb, and I got two specialists here on the show today, Mr. Mike Brown and Frederico Zimerman. They are the founders of Pit Stop Home Services, and they provide safety inspections for short-term rental hosts. So we'll dive into this topic pretty deep, but let me welcome to the show first Mike and Frederico.
Hey Jasper, how you doing?
Good.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, good to have you guys here. I know Frederico for a while. He works with Mr. Steven Suarez, the host of the Let Live Thrive, or is it Let Thrive Live? I was get confused.
Live and Thrive.
Right, the podcast.
LLT, yeah.
LLT, right? Live, Let Thrive. And Frederico, you're also. You also founded Argest Rentals, right? Property management company out of was it Houston or is it Dallas?
Dallas.
Dallas, that's
Yeah,
right. Why don't you guys give us a quick background, Federico? Why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, absolutely, Jasper. So as you were mentioning, we've been in the industry for a while, in different fronts, from education and sharing through Live Live Thrive, and we have a management company with Steve where we do both owning, arbitrage, and management for our clients. And over the years, we started noticing that there was a necessity for more education and standards on the maintenance and safety sections. Or areas of short-term rentals. And that's where I joined with Mike Brown, my friend here, that he's also interested in that part of the business, to start this company, Pit Stop Home Services, to start providing safety certifications to properties, as well as some preventive maintenance. That I'm going to let Mike also give an overview on that. So Mike, if you want to continue a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again, Jasper, for having us. I'm also here in the Dallas area. I've been a short-term rental host now going on 4 years. My wife and I started this business right after COVID. So, there are a lot of challenges with people trying to basically survive, with all of the, decreased bookings and canceled bookings and things of that nature. And it really, spurred out of the need for, at least at the time, our leases didn't overlap. And so we started out with using my previous apartment as we moved into hers, and it just kind of kicked off from there. And as it's grown and evolved, now we're over 18 properties, both owned, leased or arbitraged and managed. So it's a combination. So we kind of get three different perspectives, and we start to kind of build up on top of that as we start to build out our portfolio. But one of the important things, as we're going to talk about today, is just understanding the critical need for more safety protocols and best practices in your short-term rentals that can help cause issues down the line, and really being able to have preventative maintenance as well as a part of that. Really just a foundation or structure for any short-term rental. A lot of people focus on, a lot of the amenities and how nice it looks, but underneath that, another critical foundation piece is having this top of mind. There's different levels and tiers to it. We'll get a little bit into that as well, but I think we're going to get a lot of information, valuable information. And I think after this podcast, your guests are not going to be able to look at their short-term rentals the same ever again. So sounds a little bit scary, but it's exciting as well. So
that's a bold statement.
Yeah,
awesome.
And when we share information, it's like we say we don't want to scare anyone. We don't want you, to go to sleep thinking that someone is going to get injured or worse in your property. But the reality is that accidents happen, and the idea is to provide you with all the tools that you can to prevent that from happening, or if anything happens, for your guests to have the tools and resources to limit or mitigate any bad outcome that can happen in the property.
Yeah, when it comes to safety, there's what usually happens is something goes terribly wrong, and then people that grabs people's attention, and then they're like, all right, let's fix this, right? And so I think most hosts are not super concerned about a lot of safety aspects, because if nothing's bad ever happens, then you might not even be aware of potential dangers, like accidents that can happen. But just to scare the audience a little bit, like, why don't you share some of the kind of worst case scenarios that you guys have kind of seen? in the industry?
Well, I mean, if you're on TikTok and social media, you probably saw that a few weeks ago there was a big accident in the Smokies, and we had there was deck falling from, I think it was like 8 feet, because of the hot tub. So the deck was not prepared to stand the weight. And there was a girl in the hot tub. Luckily, she didn't die, but she got injured. So and that was very recent. But I can tell you the largest. So I always like to talk about this because it's just to give you some perspective. What is the largest settlement on a short-term rental lawsuit to a host for an accident, and it was $11.6 million. And here, Airbnb didn't cover anything. This is something that it was the host that had to pay and settle this lawsuit, and this was a story. So it happened at Gulf Shores, Alabama, where it was a house that had a pier to a river, and it was shallow water, and there was no sign that it was shallow water. So there was a group of friends. One dived. He dove into the water. Head first, broke his neck because of shallow water. The guy, he survived. He ended up with a 12-hour surgery and ended up quadriplegic. So, I mean, his life was ruined. And all because there was no sign of shallow water, don't dive, when the owners knew that it was shallow water.
Yeah. And the reason I wanted you guys to share kind of these stories is that this is something that we typically wouldn't think about, right? Like if you live in that house and you're used to that water, like it's just gonna, you might not think, you might assume that everybody will know to check the depth of the water before you dive in, right? But that's not always the case. So what can we do as hosts? What can we do to just keep our Airbnbs as safe as possible?
Good question. Mike, do you want to start?
Yeah. So, one of the things we always talk about when we get into this topic is just understanding that there are obviously layers, because you can obviously try to, foolproof everything, which is, nearly impossible. And so we want to try to find balance, right? Balance between what your risk tolerance is as a short-term rental host. Let's just say if you're first starting out, maybe you're more established, so you maybe have more to lose, right? Whether it's a larger portfolio, multiple homes, whether you own them, what have you. And then finding a balance between that and also understanding what your budget can sustain. And I say that because, and I'll give you a couple comparisons going from probably easiest to maybe more challenging if you have an existing property, because that's probably in most cases, what people are going and retroactively making sure their properties are safe. So we can start on the lower end, thinking about small things which are less costly, like, for example, ensuring that you have carpet grippers or rug grippers or tape. Sometimes over time they curl up on the edge, so that could cause a trip hazard. Just the fact of installing a smoke detector and CO detector in a home. I was actually very, very surprised as I start to learn about short-term rentals and the process of onboarding and things of that nature, how on many platforms it's not even required for you to have that in the home, which is it's outrageous in my opinion. And this is why you hear so many stories of people not waking up due to fire and having smoke inhalation or smoke damage and things of that nature, and not being able to escape, so on and so forth in time, or carbon monoxide poisoning. And so all of that could easily be avoidable by installing, $50, $40 device in the home. In addition to fire extinguishers, whether that's interior near the kitchen, there's obviously a certain placement that has to be. Even exterior, let's just say if you have a barbecue grill or a fire pit and things of that nature, because you want to be able to have access to these, because the thing about it is people don't think about these until it actually happens. And usually in those scenarios, it's either like fight or flight, right? It has to be very clear on how a person needs to be able to get out of that situation. And if it's not clear, more than likely somebody's going to potentially suffer because of that. Because that situation is chaotic, right? Other things
like on that, Mike, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Since you're talking about the fire extinguishers, I'll say, what is the common place where hosts are placing their fire extinguishers? in their properties. And most of the times it's done because it's a city requirement to get a license, if you have to get a license, and they put it under the sink, right? Now, under the sink, there's no signage, so it's hard for a person during a fire to start searching for a fire extinguisher and opening cabinets. Plus, usually under the sink is very close from the fire source. So are you expecting for people to put their face near the fire just to see if the fire extinguisher is under there or not? People are going to run for their lives, and it's not the house. They don't mind. It's like, okay, this place can burn to the grounds. I just want to get out of here. So if you place the fire extinguisher with a signage, if it's under the sink, or ideally, where it has to be, which is near an exit point, 3 to 5 feet from the ground, within 3 to 5, with the brackets provided by the manufacturer, that's going to give you more chances for the person that is in the place to actually see the fire extinguisher and give it a try and see he or she can put off the fire.
One other thing I'll note on that too, I'm not saying this is secondary. Well, it is secondary to safety because safety is paramount. But even by having those types of things and all the other devices that we're talking about, not only can save lives, but also think about less damage to your property, right? If they're able to save or mitigate further damage, same thing with water leaks. I mean, you'd be surprised the number of hosts that could probably not, they probably couldn't tell you where the water shutoff is at the house, right? And so if there's a pipe burst or things of that nature, literally every minute counts. So whether that's somebody that has to drive out to the property, whatever, so you could literally be saving thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in repairs by small mitigation factors like that. So I think that is a piece people need to think about as well.
I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier, because I never thought about that, but you said something about the rugs and the carpets that you can kind of stick them to the floor.
Yeah. So if you have an area rug on a hard surface, like a wood floor or a tile floor, cement floor, if that's the case, because over time, and even if you have, there's another method you can use as well. If you do a area rug on top of carpet, a little bit more challenging, but essentially it prevents the natural curling edge of the corners, especially if it's in a walking path. People can trip over that pretty easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that. So I guess there's different things that we can do, right? We gotta kind of have the basics in place, like the fire extinguisher that you mentioned and the smoke detectors and all that stuff. Let's talk a little bit more about the signage, right? Because the example that you mentioned, where the guy got injured by jumping in the water, having a sign there that says like, "Hey, be careful, don't dive, shallow water," would have prevented that. What are some other examples of things that we should warn our guests for? Because we also don't want to have like 50 different signs, because then that's going to affect the experience of the guest, right? So what are some other things that we should warn our guests about, some potential dangers?
That's a great question. And when it comes to signage, I'll say it's not only to warn them, but also signage that is useful in case of any emergency. So the first two things I'll say that you're required to have in order to be certified. And we also want to talk about a little bit the certifying process, right? But in order to be certified, first of all, you want to make sure that you have an emergency card in your fridge, where you have emergency numbers and the address of the property. Because I can assure you that if there's an emergency, if you need to call an ambulance, the guest is not going to open your Airbnb app to find the address and the check-in instructions. So they need to be able to locate that quickly, because they're not going to remember that. And at the same time, you want to make sure that your the house numbers, signage, there are numbers at least 4 inches and well lit. So if you call emergencies, they can actually locate the property easily. Other type of signage that is recommended to have is for pools. So the pool rules and the basic on the pools, even pool markers. So that's another very important signage for people to know the depth of the pool. Mike, can you think of any others?
In terms of signage, not really. I mean, like you said before, just being able to inform people of how to use things, because, we try our best as hosts to be able to, be proactive and provide guidance. There's a lot of, things coming out with digital guidebooks now. People used to have the whole binder, when you come in and things of that nature. But either method, just by default, people don't read, unfortunately. They're there to relax. They don't want to have another checklist or things to do. And so, I mean, we get it. But at least having that available, and this doesn't necessarily mean, I probably should have started out saying this too, that it absolves you of any liability by any means. And one thing to make note with any of these safety certification, that doesn't necessarily mean that your property is foolproof and quote unquote safe. What it does mean is that your property provides the best practices and guidelines that are conducive to a safer environment. And so that's definitely a thing to remember, because as you know, we can't prevent anything, but if we do our due diligence and try to be proactive in ways like we're talking about right now, it goes way above and beyond what many hosts are already doing. And I think as regulations continue to evolve and expand throughout the United States and other parts of the world, we'll start to see these become kind of more standardized across the board. So, yeah.
I had a guest on the podcast a while back who actually got sued by a guest because the guest tripped on the in front of her house on the walkway because there was a couple steps, and he was arguing that the steps weren't well lit, so he couldn't see it well. Do you guys have any recommendations on that? Like, if we have steps on our property, like what are the requirements there to keep it safe?
Oh yeah, there are markers. Right now, I don't have my notes to tell exactly the height of any step that you need to mark. But when we certify a property, we're gonna look for any steps that are not clearly marked, and we're gonna recommend to have it marked. There's strips and different things that you can put for people to see where there are steps, and that's a huge one. Yeah, that's something that people, even on surfaces on a backyard. If you have a hole or something like that in the ground, that's something we want to look for, because someone can break a leg stepping into a hole in the grass in the backyard.
Yeah. Another example is on our property in Idlewild. I was just there a couple of days ago. We're doing renovations up there, so I was just kind of walking around. We've got quite a bit of land, and it's quite steep, and we have a creek as well. There's lots of trees, and it snows in the winter, so there's quite a few things that could potentially go wrong. So I was just kind of walking around and thinking, like, what are the biggest hazards on our land here? And we do have one sign that says walkway slippery when there's snow, right? And I looked at that, and I was kind of like, at first I was thinking it's kind of like obvious, right? If there's snow, like, it's going to be slippery. It's like, really, do we really have to warn guests about that? But then I realized that because my wife has never seen snow in her life, right? And then I realized, I was like, oh, but if somebody who's never seen snow, they might not know that, right? It's obvious to me, but it might not be obvious to everybody. And I think it's important for us to really put ourselves in the shoes of the guests and just kind of assume that the guest doesn't know anything, and then with that mindset, kind of looking at, like, okay, what are the things that we should point out that could prevent accidents?
That is huge, and part of certifying a property is understanding the environment of the property, to see things that are particular to that area, that that are not general for every property, but are particular, again, to the environment and the surroundings of the property, which is not in a checklist, but it's something you want to understand and prevent. Again, it's not the same challenges you have in a place where it snows than in a water beach destination that you may have in a city or urban area. So that's for sure. And taking it to the hospitable part of signing and communicating, it's huge to understand that your guest may not know their environment, surroundings, and even things that are found inside the house that are new to them. Coming from abroad, and you may understand this, Jasper, there are things in America that are not found in other countries, in houses in other countries, right? GFCI outlets, garbage disposals, dishwashers are not very common in Europe, are not very common in Latin America. And when you have people staying at your properties that are from abroad, it's the first time they may see that. And having the communication ready or instructions for that is how you also enhance your hosting experience.
Right. Yeah, I think another example, and you and I might have talked about this before, I think there's something with gas as well, right? Like
Yeah.
if people aren't using like a gas grill, right? That could
Hmm.
be a potential challenge.
Yeah, man, I love the so I'm used to cook all my life. I cook with charcoal. You know, coming from Argentina, that's how we do our steak. The other day, I left the gas open in one of the grills, and my wife's like, "Hey, take care of that," because I'm not used to that, right? And again, say I'm certified as a safety inspector. I should know that, but you know, in the day to day, when you are having a relaxation moment, which is what your guests are experiencing, right? They are with their vacation mind, and that's how it was. I was kind of a vacation mind. Uh, People forget things, and that's why you want to make sure that, for example, your grill is not near flammable structure, that it has at least 9 feet overhead. And that's a very common thing. And actually, that's an accident that happened in Florida. They had barbecue on a balcony with only like I'll say 6 feet overhead. It catch on fire, and one person died. So that's another example of things that happen, accidents. So you want to make sure that if you're cooking, if you're having a barbecue grill, there's space on the back and above in case it catches on fire.
Yeah, now that you mentioned barbecues and Argentinian steak, I can't resist but throwing in there a quick travel recommendation for anybody who
Mhm.
ever visits Buenos Aires. It's one of the best meat experiences I've ever had was in the restaurant called La Cabrera
Oh
in
yeah.
Palermo in Buenos Aires. Have you been there?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was there in January. I went there with I went back to visit, and we went with my wife and my father-in-law. It's just amazing.
It's one of the best restaurants I've ever been to. What I thought was really cool about this restaurant is it's so popular that there's always people waiting outside, and they serve
Hmm.
champagne while
Yeah.
you're waiting. Right, so you always every time you pass there, you see a bunch of people drinking champagne, and I always felt like it's such a good marketing, right? Because everybody who
Oh
walks
yeah.
past is like, what's that restaurant, right?
Yeah.
And
Anyway,
there are two places like that. It's La Cabrera and Don Julio is the other one. And actually, this week I opened my condo for bookings on Airbnb. That is one block from that restaurant. It's already booked out for July, so I'm getting booking strong. So I'm very happy.
awesome, awesome. All right, well, this was a quick travel tip in there, but let's go back to the safety chat that we're having here. So, tell us a little bit more about and I know you guys founded this company, Pit Stop Home Services, to really help hosts to keep their Airbnb safe. Tell us a little bit more about your process and how you can help hosts.
Yeah, so I can jump in here. So essentially, it's a subscription based service. And we have a couple of tiers related to that, in addition to the inspection. So the more simple inspection is, I think, a 26-point checklist that our team will go through and evaluate the property on. That's in accordance with the Breezeway guidelines. That's what our certification is under. And then there's a more robust one that's about a 84 point list item, and then there's another one that's like 160. Um, so there's varying levels, and so again, depending on where that particular property is in their journey, and what their quote unquote baseline is kind of what we can recommend. Obviously, in order to actually get the certification for the top tier one, there's probably going to be some financial investment that you're gonna have to make. Um, to either making some potential upgrades, which may be minor, but those little things can kind of add up. But on the more lower tier, a lot of things can be purchased at the home goods store kind of thing to be able to put into a property, and then just ongoing maintenance and preventative maintenance. So whether that's changing out air filters, as well as looking at draining, or sorry, not draining, snaking drains. Just over time, just naturally hair gets clogged up in drains, and you don't want to have that happen while a guest is there, and now that's interrupting their stay, and things of that nature. You want to kind of want to get ahead of that and just snake them as a part of your normal practice. And so we have a subscription for that kind of thing, to bundle those things together so that you are proactively preventing things from happening on the property. Um, Another piece to that as well is ensuring that, just naturally over time, furniture also gets loose, right? The screws and then things of that nature and the bolts that go into beds and chairs and tables, just naturally over time, and even over the course of a year, they can get loose just from, all the traffic that's happening in those particular properties. And so one, that can cause a potential safety issue if somebody falls or the chair leg breaks while somebody's sitting in it, or just in general, a weak chair leg or table leg can cause further damage to that furniture, and now you have to replace it. So those kinds of things, which go a long way, and unfortunately, hosts don't necessarily think about that. So we're bringing that to the forefront and really being able to have those that want to be at the top of their field, at the top of their game, maximize their potential and mitigate risk at the same time.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you have two ways to dealing with situations on your short-term rental like that. When it comes to maintenance, is you either fix it before it happens, or when your guest tells you about it. And option two is usually the worst one, because that's gonna affect your reviews, the guest experience, and that's not what you want to do. So the idea of pit stop home service is the pit stop. If you are familiar with car racing, pit stop is when the cars are racing and they stop for a brief moment, to be serviced quickly and efficiently to continue racing. And this is the way that if you think about a short-term rental, it has a high use. You have turnover after turnover after turnover, and at some point you need to stop for a few moments, make sure that the short-term rental is safe and that is well maintained to keep running without any issues, right? Because that's the whole idea.
Yeah, and even down to because we have a partner that we work with on the HVAC, plumbing, and electrical side, evaluating those systems as well, at least on an annual basis. Because when you think about whether it's a homeowner or whether it's a lease, taking care of the property, even for those major systems, can go a long way and help you identify problems before they even happen. And even just taking inventory of things. So when we onboard our properties, as a part of that checklist is for major appliances on the property. We get the model numbers, serial numbers, so we know the types of appliances they are. And for the vendors that we work with, they're skilled enough to come prepared with the typical issues that may be happening for that particular model or brand, so on and so forth. Because appliances, a lot of times, those things are more commonplace for certain model numbers, and they know that. And so they can come equipped with the right tools and really save time and money and be efficient with the process at the end of the day. And for some systems, for larger systems, depending on the age and the life of them, you can kind of know when they may need to be replaced. So, for example, you got a 22-year-old ACE system, you may not even make it through the summer. So being prepared financially or whatever have you, to be able to act on that, and or maybe even have the proper insurance or home warranty in place to mitigate financial or major financial losses in that aspect as well. And if I have a moment, I want to give that comparison on the insurance that people always, if I can,
go for it, man.
So one of the things I had mentioned, and Frederico and I talk about this all the time, is that people always think that, hey, short-term rental insurance will, save me in all these particular situations. That may not always be the case. And being able to have systems in place like this and best practices can, not only help you, but also help your brand and potentially make you stand out. I know I'm kind of going on a little bit of a tangent, but even in scenarios where you're working with more B2B, I know the vast majority of the short-term rental industry is doing B2C, right? Business to customer. But once you go to B2B, even if it's not a midterm rental scenario, they're going to be looking for those things that ensure that their employees or their staff are going to be safe, right? And if you can show that with the certification and the due diligence that you've done, I mean, you're already a cut above. But what I want to get at was with the insurance side. So there's a comparison, and I brought it up because I didn't want to misquote it, that talks about the way that people think about wearing a seatbelt in the way that short-term rental operators think about insurance. So in the scenario where you've got a car driver and they say, hey, the airbags work, why wear a seatbelt when the airbags can protect me if I get in an accident? People have this perspective of, hey, well, this is my car. Don't tell me to do, don't tell me what to do in my own car. If I want to wear a seatbelt, I can wear it whenever I want. And the government shouldn't regulate, if I wear a seatbelt. And then you also have the perspective of, I'll never be in a car wreck. I'm a great driver. Only the people that get hurt are the people who don't know how to drive, and those are the ones that get in car accidents, which is a horrible perspective. But this is how people think. When you translate that to short-term rentals, people think that, hey, insurance will protect me. My insurance provider didn't say anything when they saw the photos of the property and the listing, so it must be okay, right? Don't tell me how to make my home safe, especially for those that have lived in the home before they made it into a short-term rental. It's been safe my whole life that I've lived in it with kids, so on and so forth. Nothing's ever happened to us, so it should be fine. And then the last is, the people in big government thinking, hey, the government shouldn't have any business telling me how I should regulate my property. It's my private home. So all those kind of perspectives. And, there's just that small percentage of people you'll never change their mind. But those that see this and understand it and see the perspective, typically are the ones that are going to make that pivot and do what's best for their guests at the end of the day. So I just want to share that. That was like a little funny comparison. And, see if we can change some minds. So.
Yes, I guess there's the topic of insurance, and I'm sure there's people thinking, well, I'm insured, so I'm fine. But then there's a lot of it's always better to prevent stuff than even if you're protected. Yeah, even if you have the airbag, you still don't really want to get in the car accident, right?
Yeah, and you all know how insurances work, right? If they find that you were you are not what is the word? So you didn't take the measurements. It's like, yeah, you're negligent. It's gonna fall on you, and that's a part that's important to understand. Is first of all, if you get certified through us, we're gonna certify you through Breezeway, and that's gonna give you 10% discount on your proper insurance if you use proper, which is already great, and it's gonna help paying part of your inspection. And also there's been examples where people had accidents in the house, and the owners were able to prove that that the house was inspected through a paper trail on emails, and with that they got off the hook from lawsuits because the house was inspected and the negligence were the guests. And that's also important, right? It's just understanding that taking these steps is not going to prevent making sure that nothing will happen. But if something happens, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, not only you're going to provide all the tools and resources and best practices to mitigate any issue, but also you're going to be covered because you are being the opposite of negligence, right? You're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing. And to quote, the person who developed the entire curriculum for this certification is Justin Ford. And I think that what he's doing for the industry is extremely valuable. So I thank him. And it is huge. And he says compliance is devastating, and that's something to keep in mind, right? That's the way he put it, and that really struck me. It's like, yeah, you think it's not going to happen to me. It's going to happen to the next door property, not to me, but it may happen to you.
So what was the name of the person you mentioned again?
Justin Ford.
Justin Ford. Okay. Got it. Shout out to Mr. Justin Ford. Let's see. Is there anything else that we should be talking about that we haven't talked about yet?
There's so many things to keep in mind in your house, but I'll make sure that think about you have all the best standards and processes when it comes to alarms. Smoke alarms is very important. For example, you want to make sure that all the alarms are connected. So if it's activated in the kitchen, it's also activated in every bedroom, and that in every bedroom is at least 80 decibels. That's something that we will be verifying if we do an inspection, because another thing to keep in mind is that most of the people on vacations are drinking alcohol, and that's going to lower their ability to wake up if something is happening. I have a heavy sleeping. I've slept through earthquakes and all that stuff, so I understand that. So you want to make sure that people can hear that. I will say, but something I noticed, and I love to go to Airbnb and look into other people's listings and see what people are doing, running comps and stuff like that. And I cannot tell you how many times I've seen a tiny bedroom with 2 queen bunk beds, so that's 8 people in a tiny bedroom with a fan in the middle. and no window. So no second escape route from the bedroom, and a fan in between the bed banks is just an accident waiting to happen, because it's gonna happen, because someone's gonna jump from the upper bed, and they're gonna
That's
hit
gonna
their
be
head. And it's been happening. I mean, there's been incidents like that reported on short-term rentals. So yeah, what else do you have in mind, Mike?
No, I think we hit a lot of great topics and points. I mean, at the end of the day, we just want people to reevaluate and look at their property with fresh eyes. As a short term rental operator, if you've been operating, especially out of the same home for more than 2 or 3 years, it's probably time to have a third party come and do it, because you get blinders on as the rental manager, as the owner. And so having somebody as a third party come in and evaluate the property, they'll be able to point out some things, and you may not like it, but point out some things that you should probably consider, improving on your property to add that value and also the safety piece to it. One of the big ones you mentioned earlier, which a lot of people don't think about, especially when they're taking on existing homes, is, most homes aren't, set up in a commercial way, unless somebody's added on those kinds of amenities, to have lighting on the exterior that's kind of automated, right? With the photo sensor to turn on dusk till dawn, all that kind of stuff. And so we'll take on properties, because we do management as well, and they don't have those kinds of features. And so when you think about a scenario where somebody's checking in late at night, if nobody else has been at the home, the lights are probably off, and you don't want somebody driving up or walking up to a completely dark home in a neighborhood they don't know. Again, we talked about trip hazards before and things of that nature. And so even small things like that, we always recommend for our homeowners to do upgrades on, to be able to have that. I mean, it's nice curb appeal too, right? And you just don't want to have somebody to just have the front light on 24/7, because that's not reasonable either, right? Because what's going to happen is, the cleaner, after they clean, they're going to turn it off, whether it's by accident or not, or the guests that left previously are going to turn them off. And then when the next guest comes in, they're going to be off, right? So having that system automated in a way that nobody has to think about it, is a great way to go. So anyway, there's probably lots more we can talk about. We love this kind of stuff, and we can get pretty deep into it. But at the end of the day, we just want to be able to elevate the standard of hosts. So.
Right. And you guys, I know you guys are in Dallas. Do you just have this service in your market, or are you in different areas in the United States as well?
We're starting right now in Dallas, but we plan to expand rapidly. So we have contact with all operators, larger operators that are getting certified to start providing and partner with us as well, under the same name. It's the Stop Home Services, and the idea is to expand this to entire nation. We're starting here in the DFW area.
Yeah, if there's definitely a need with someone that has a larger portfolio in a certain area or city, we're happy to do travel to make that happen as well, where it makes sense. So, yeah.
Right. Awesome, guys. We appreciate you guys jumping on here and sharing your wisdom. So again, for the listeners, Pit Stop Home Services, if you want to check out the process and the inspection lists and all of that good stuff, then go ahead and check it out. And with that said, that's the end of the podcast for today. So again, Mike and Freddie, thank you so much for being here. And to the listeners, thanks for listening. We'll be back on Friday with another episode. So we'll see you then, and have a great week.
Thank you, Jasper.
Thank you.